We're out here on the Dittmer-Watts trail, just walking along just to see what all kinds of things that are blooming right now. Dittmer-Watts is not what I would call a wildflower treasure trove or anything, but there are some really interesting species that are found out here, and we're going to try to see how many of those we can discover while we're out here walking along. The trail does offer a lot of really interesting communities, which is what is needed to have a lot of different species. But one of the things you find when you're walking out here is it's a very new forest in terms of it was clear cut several years ago, and as a result this forest is still growing, so there's still a lot of maturing that has to happen, and as the forest matures its plant diversity will increase. So let's walk along the trail here and see what kind of things we can find. Here's a really cool plant. This is called by many people running pine or running cedar or creeping cedar is another name. I've even heard it called turkey foot, turkey tail. So it goes by a lot of names, and it's had a couple of different scientific name changes as well, and I don't even remember what the current scientific name is for this, but it's a really interesting plant, and it's what we call a fern ally. Okay, and it reproduces by spores, and it will produce these little cone-like structures that are spore-bearing structures, and when those spores get ready to release, they come out in this very fine yellowish powder. And that powder actually is collected from this and other species that are closely related to it, and they use it to make flash powder. And with flash powder is highly explosive. It's really cool stuff. But it's said that back during the Civil War, when the blockade of the Confederate States was underway, that Confederate soldiers, due to the fact that their gunpowder supplies were low, that they would supplement their gunpowder with the spores from this plant because it's pretty prolific. I mean, you can look through the woods there and you can see that it's everywhere. But they would use this to help supplement their gunpowder because of its explosive quality, and it's used today still in various things, a lot of science shows and magic shows and things like that, because you can get a real good flash of flame with it. That might be a demonstration for another day, but this is called running pine. And here's another interesting little plant. Okay, this is called hog peanut. Okay, it's a member of the pea family. Some people confuse it with kudzu because it has these three leaflets that look similar to kudzu, and it's actually growing in this goldenrod here. But the flowers are kind of interesting, and my guess is, I've never pulled it up, but I suspect that like other members of the pea family, and peanuts in particular, you could pull this up and it probably has little extensions that hang off the tubers where the actual what the peanuts actually would be. Okay, peanuts are actually dug up. They grow under the ground off of the roots of the actual peanut. This is not peanut itself, because peanuts are not native to our area, but it is called hog peanut. And those are its flowers right there. You see its vine-like structure. This is called a leaf. This whole thing, this is what we call a ternately compound leaf, and it's ternately compound because it has three leaflets. Count them, 1, 2, 3. Okay, the leaf is actually this whole thing. Okay, and if you were to look down here where it attaches to the stem, okay, there's probably a bud, a leaf bud, that is adjoined to it. Okay, but typically these things come out, a leaf comes out, and it usually has a bract below it, which would have been the bud from where the leaf emerged from. Okay, so this has a ternately compound leaf. Okay, just like kudzu. Here's a kudzu leaf. It also is ternately compound. Poison ivy is another example of something with a ternately compound leaf. Then you have something like this. This is mimosa right here. Okay, mimosa has just a plain old compound leaf. Okay, but this one is what we call bipinnate. Okay, it's bipinnately compound, and each one of these little things here, as far as these on the leaf itself, these are called pinna. Okay, and the ferns are another way that they, another thing that can be bipinnately compound, and that's actually where what these leaves are similar to are fern leaves, but it's bipinnately compound because there are all these leaflets found on the actual leaf itself. This whole thing here is a leaf. Alright, looking here, this yellow flower we have here, this yellow flowering plant, is called tall goldenrod. Some people call it Canada goldenrod. Its scientific name is Solidago canadensis. And this is one of our late summer wildflowers. Goldenrod is one of those species that kind of gets a bad rap. It gets accused of being the perpetrator of causing allergies. Okay, but in reality, it's not an allergy causer, if that's a word. Basically, the pollen grains of goldenrod are too small, I mean too large to really cause allergies. But there is another species that does cause allergies that also blooms this time of year, called ragweed. Ragweed has windblown pollen, whereas goldenrod does not have windblown pollen. Its pollen is carried by specific pollinators. Okay, and there's a lot of different things that you can find that use goldenrod. Here's a tiger swallowtail, female. Okay, it's being still, that's good. So rare that those things are still enough to get a good shot of them. But the swallowtail, as well as other things, are actually looking for the nectar that's found in the flowers. These are members of the composite family, so their flowers are a little different than your typical flower. These are mainly composed of little tiny flowers called disc flowers, but there's a whole lot of them that are found on the inflorescence, and so they call them they call them composites because of the different kinds of flowers that they have. But goldenrods there's a huge variety of goldenrods found throughout our area, and tall goldenrod is the species that is the largest in terms of height. It generally grows anywhere from a couple of feet to as much as 4 or 5 feet in height. So it's a pretty neat plant. Okay, so here's another interesting species that's found out here in this area. This is called great blue, or actually not great blue. This is called purple lobelia, or hairy lobelia. It's another name for it, or downy lobelia. Its scientific name is Lobelia puberula, and it's named that because it has very thick hairs on its flowering stem and on its flowers, and this makes it unique from other lobelia species that are found out here. And I'm getting kind of out of focus here. Back it up a little bit here. Yeah, that helps some. Okay, but lobelias are typically bloom this time of year. They are there's a couple other species that are purple like this one, and almost all of them are toxic in some form or fashion, such that if you were to inhale any smoke from these, if you were burning it, it can cause mild hallucinations. Okay, but it can also kill you. So lobelia, it has an alkaloid in it called lobeline, and it's actually not a good thing for you. It can cause some heart palpitations and a few other things, so it's something that should be avoided. But the flowers are quite beautiful. This has what we call asymmetrical flowers. Okay, you can look there, and if you were to cut those flowers in half, they would be bilaterally symmetrical. Okay, we also call that as those names irregular and zygomorphic. Those are a couple of other terms that are associated with these flowers. But this is downy lobelia. Okay, so we got an interesting find here. This is something called a passion fruit. Okay, they also call them maypops. Okay, but it comes from a plant called the purple passion flower. Okay, which is a really interesting vine that has these beautiful purple flowers. And we're going to see if we can find some of the flowers here in a minute. But these maypops, okay, which is the name of the fruit, these are edible. If you were to break it open inside, it has a white inside. It has a kind of a sweet but acrid smell. But people will eat these things. I'm not a fan. They have to get ripe, and they kind of will turn a yellowish color when they're ripe. I personally have never really cared for the taste. It's kind of an odd flavor. And there's other types of passion fruit that have a better flavor than these do. Some of the tropical species actually have quite a really sweet taste, and are often used in fruit drinks and things like that. That's really interesting. But you can tell it's on a vine. These vines are twining. They wrap around other things. That's why it's a vine. The vine's kind of semi-woody, okay, but really interesting plant. All right, and here's the flower of the passion fruit. This is the purple passion flower. Okay, and it's a very cool plant. This is the floral structure up here. You can see it has these stamens. These are the male parts of the plant here. Okay, and these are the pistils, okay, or the female parts of the plant. Okay, and we got, wow, check that out. We got a pollinator, and it's actually got pollen all over the top of its head, or actually actually its head is on the top of its thorax. So this thing's been actively pollinating other things. Okay, very, very cool. Okay, beneath those pistils, at the point where those pistils connect with where the stamens are, you'll find a little round thing, and that's the ovary. Okay, and the ovary is where the fruit will form on this particular plant. These little purple things, they don't technically classify as petals. Okay, the petals are these pieces down, these little things down here, and then underneath you would have some green scales there, and those are actual what we call sepals, and they actually cover. They're like scales. They cover the rest of the flower before it opens. Okay, but very, very cool. Watch that bumblebee work. But you can see up close kind of how those floral parts are. But what a really neat flower. There's not a whole lot of other flowers that look anything like the flower of passion flower. Pretty awesome. Okay, here's another lobelia species. This is called cardinal flower. Cardinal flower is one of my absolute favorites, especially of the summer wildflowers, because of that bright scarlet red color. Its scientific name is Lobelia cardinalis, and it is also often called red lobelia or scarlet lobelia. And like other lobelias, it's also toxic, has the same alkaloids in it that make the other ones toxic. But this particular plant is a favorite of hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are the primary things that use this plant. They draw the nectar from it. In fact, if you look at those flowers, okay, the flowers have these interesting pistils, okay, that are long, and a hummingbird can actually poke its beak down inside those long pistils and reach the nectar down at the bottom. Okay, but these are absolutely beautiful flowers. Okay, and if we look down here on it, as you can see, it has already had flowers from further down on the stem. These are the fruit that are developing on the plant, and these will go to seed, and there'll be more cardinal flower that'll come up. When we look down further, we can actually see the leaves on the plant. Okay, this is something we would call alternate leaved, because the leaves are located in alternating positions along the stem from each other. So this is alternate leaved, and that's pretty typical of lobelias. But if you were just looking for a way to identify this one between the other lobelias that are found in our area, this one would be the easiest one to identify, because it's the only one that has red flowers like this. So this is cardinal flower. Alright, this little plant here, actually I shouldn't say it's little, it's actually quite tall. Actually, it looks almost like a shrub, but it's not. It's not woody. It is herbaceous. And when we say herbaceous, it means that it's like an herb. Okay, but this is called spotted jewelweed or spotted touch-me-not. And they call it jewelweed because when water falls on the leaves, it looks like little jewels that collect on the leaves, like little dewdrops. So it's real neat, because the leaves are kind of waxy. Okay, but bumblebees and honeybees will pollinate this plant. But what makes this plant special? A couple different things. Number one, this is it's said to be a natural antidote for poison ivy, and it actually does help with the itching. You can actually rub this on poison ivy, and it will take the itch away, for at least temporarily. Okay, another really cool thing about this plant is its fruit. When you touch the fruit, they will explode and will actually throw seed all over. And this is its way of distributing its seed explosively, and this gets those seeds away from the parent plant so that it doesn't compete as readily. Although if you look at this whole thing here, this is a whole patch of it, and most likely these are all the progeny of a single plant at some point. Okay, but it's quite thick in here. But this is spotted jewelweed, and it's actually called that because of the spots that are found in the flower. Okay, the flowers, let me if I can get a good focus here. The flowers on the inside have all these orange spots, and those spots probably act as nectar guides for whatever pollinator might come along. There's another species called pale jewelweed, and it's yellow, except for on the inside. The inside has red spots. So, again, those are probably nectar guides that point the whatever pollinator it is to the back of the plant. Okay, because back in here, this part of the plant is where the nectar would be found, and then in order to get to the nectar, the pollinator would have to pass by the pollen-bearing structures, which are the anthers, the male flower, and the anthers are the large part of the stamen. So they'd have to get back there and cross over those anthers to get to the nectar, and then in doing so they brush some pollen against the top of the pistil, which will help to fertilize the flower. So it's a really cool process. We'll see if we can find some fruit that we can explode. Okay, so I found one. This is what the fruit actually look like of jewelweed, these little bean-like structures here. And this one's not quite fully ripe. When they get ripe, they actually get larger and they get more swollen than this one is. But when they're swollen and ripe, okay, then that means they're ready for those seeds to disperse. So this one actually, it may be good that this one's not quite ripe, because it won't quite do what one who's really thick would do. But when you touch these, they split or dehisce along two sides. And I'm going to touch it and you'll see what happens. See, it opens up, okay, just like that, and when it does, the seeds roll out. It's got little pieces in there, okay, that roll out. And these things roll, they're like springs, and when they roll very quickly, and it projects the seeds out and throws it away from the plant. And some of these can throw seed as far as about 4 feet, anywhere from 4 to 6 feet, depending on how explosively they let go. And once they don't necessarily have to be touched by anything. The wind can blow the plant, and those things will detonate on their own. Sometimes they'll just turn loose because they're fat and swollen and ready to pop, and all it takes is just something to just slightly brush them like the wind, and then they'll pop on their own. So it's a great self-dispersal mechanism because they're not relying on something else to help distribute their seed. So it's really an awesome mechanism that these plants have to disperse seed. I'm looking around and seeing if I can find any that are just waiting to just explode, because that would be really awesome to be able to show you on some video. Got a really thick patch over here. Just look at how many flowers. And a lot of times you'll find jewelweed growing in places where poison ivy is prevalent, or even another species called stinging nettle. Stinging nettle is another one that jewelweed is used to treat. And wow, I see a huge one right here. This one is ready to go. Let's see if I can even touch it before it explodes. Watch this. Okay, make sure it's in focus here. Okay. Oh, see, just popped right out, and that's because of that explosive nature of the fruit. So that's pretty cool. And you could spend hours out here just looking for fruit and trying to touch them. In fact, that's what I used to do just for fun. When I was a teenager, I would find these patches of jewelweed, and I just walk around and see how many of them I could set off. But again, good for poison ivy, good for treating stinging nettle, things like that. Hey, there's another one. I think it's swollen enough. Let's see. I can get that leaf out of the way here. Oh, yep, there it went. Isn't that cool? Alright, let's see what else we can find. Alright, so check this out. We're not too far from the highway, so you may hear cars going by. These things are called persimmons. And if you've lived out in the country as long as I have, you've certainly ate one. Okay, you've either eaten it on purpose or because somebody tricked you into doing it. Okay, persimmons, especially when they're on the tree like this, okay, these are not ripe. In fact, you can squish it or try to push it, and it's very firm. If you were to try to eat this thing, it would feel like it turned your mouth wrong side out. That's kind of how sour and acrid these things are. Okay, here's another one here. Okay, and it's very hard. Okay, but they're all over. This thing is loaded down. I don't think I've ever seen a persimmon tree with quite as many as what this one has on it. Okay, you can look up in there and it's just all over this tree. The limbs are heavy because they've got so many persimmons on them. Look at that. Okay. Persimmons, whenever they're in season, okay, are a very popular mast food source. Okay, so there's a lot of different animals and things that feed on persimmons, especially your smaller mammals. Okay, so possums will eat these, raccoons will eat them, even coyotes will eat them. It's quite possible that deer probably browse on them and pick them up off the ground. Okay, this is one that's off the ground, and when they hit the ground, that's when they're almost ready to eat. Persimmons are best when they're just about rotten. Okay, because they have to get some things that kind of help wash the nastiness out. But this one's just about a little too far gone. It probably wouldn't be too good because it's split open. But if you look around on the ground, you can find some that are just about ready. But they turn orange, and when they're perfect, they are a deep colored orange. And if you were to go deeper in the woods where there's a persimmon tree, you might find some that are already kind of approaching the good stage. These are not quite ripe yet, but you just about want them to be rotten when you find these things, or else they're just so sour that you really can't tolerate eating them because of their sourness. Okay, but people used to take these and make pies out of them. They call them persimmon pies or cinnamon pie. They'd leave off the first 3 letters. So that's not an unusual thing, but very, very important food source for a lot of different animals as we move from summer into fall. But persimmons are definitely a fruit that represent that time period as we move from summer to fall. So it's a transition time that we're in, and this is when you start to see things like persimmons. So if you're ever walking along near a cow pasture or something like that, it's very likely that you'll find a persimmon tree growing along that fence row, because that's a lot of times these trees were left along fence rows and things because cows occasionally will eat them. Goats will eat them. So quite a popular food among a lot of different animals.